Arctic is the circumpolar region of the Earth that surrounds the North Pole, a strange and mystical world of ice, snow, land, and water. In order to discover this untamed primeval wilderness, it is necessary to travel by way of an expeditionary cruise ship. These ships use small rubber boats, Zodiacs, to access the Arctic's islands and bays, the ultimate experience. We spot the region's first floating ice mountains in front of a huge glacial wall, fascinating and of incalculable dimensions. At the rear, and shrouded in mist, dark mesas with steep scree slopes and fragile rock walls. In front, the glacier gradually breaks up into a sea of ice. On the edge of the Arctic, despite its proximity to the North Pole, the west coast of the island of Spitsbergen is mostly free of ice in the polar summer months due to the flow of the Gulf Stream. In 1596, Dutch explorer Willem Barents discovered this remote archipelago for Europe and considered its unexpectedly emerging coastline to be part of Greenland. Bare, black rock mountains and huge glaciers determine the shoreline regions of the islands here. The ships anchor at a safe distance from the land. Despite the Arctic altitude and the short growing season, the fauna here is amazingly diverse. The plants of the polar tundra must fight for survival, with low temperatures, high winds, and the movement of the soil. Along with the near impenetrable ground in which the roots can only just take hold. A handful of huts is occupied by various licensed hunters and scientists. In the Arctic, climate change is very apparent. Its bays now freeze over later than they did in the past. When chunks of ice break off a glacier, it is referred to as a calving. The resultant broken chunks of ice form the floating icebergs whose journeys begin here in all shapes and sizes. Several glaciers form the typical landscape. 60% of the islands are covered with ice, and dense accumulations of both snow and ice slowly move to the coast by their own weight. As the ice stream flows, its icy front breaks off into the sea. Glacial ice is subject to various forces. When a glacier moves above underlying rock, strange formations are often created. The Zodiacs transport today's explorers to the shore. A group of walruses swims just off one of the islands. The boat travels close to them. A dangerous but rewarding adventure. Agitated, the large animals swim back to the safety of their island home. Here there's a large colony of walruses on the banks, crowded body to body, and at the moment, very relaxed. They were here in the Miocene period, 23 to 5 million years ago. The walrus young are brilliant swimmers. On land they appear to be clumsy, but in water they are expert swimmers. For communication within the group they have a special repertoire of grunts, howls and screeches. Further north, pack ice appears. To form this, thousands of square kilometers of water have been transformed into centimeter-thick sheets of ice. With each drop of freezing water, the pack ice increases in both volume and strength. This is the land of the polar bear, the Arctic's most famous carnivore, a magnificent but merciless predator. With its amazingly strong legs and sturdy paws and claws, it can move around on icy surfaces as though it were on solid ground. However, signs of climate change are everywhere. Now the pack ice often becomes porous and the polar bears cannot cover the same areas that they once did. Polar bears often travel for weeks without finding anything to eat, and so must be constantly vigilant. In general, adult polar bears are excellent survivors. In good times, they can add up to 150 kilograms of fat on which they can survive for months, and in some cases, up to a year. A harp seal flees from its ice floe in the Arctic Sea, but soon a group of hungry polar bears hunts it down at the cycle of nature. Polar bears have sensitive hearing and an excellent sense of smell. They're able to detect seals from up to a kilometer away. They wait in ambush and surprise their prey. Both seals and whales must surface in order to breathe. It is then that the white giants attack. They can also track prey beneath a 1 meter thick sheet of snow and ice. Humpback whales live in every ocean. However, the northern animals migrate in summer to the North Sea, and those in the south migrate to the South Polar Sea. reproduction takes place in tropical waters. After a 12-month gestation period, the young are born. The Bruneck's guillemot is attracted to the high Arctic region and its cliffs. In the rocks of the cliffs, geological history can be seen as though in a picture book, an almost complete record of the last billion years. Suddenly, a single polar bear moves along the rocky coast. It seems to be hungry and is approaching the territory of the thick-billed murre. It deftly climbs the steep rocks. Observed by the many birds that breed on the rocky ledges. The bear wants to steal the eggs from the birds' nests, but it's a risky business. Anything could happen. The name Arctic is derived from Arctos, the Greek word for bear. The star constellation of the Big Bear points the way to the polar star Polaris. At one time, this region was thought to be the source of the north wind Boreas, which blows both ice and snow to the south in winter. The North Pole lies beneath the ice-covered Arctic Ocean. South of it is the tundra, a treeless landscape with little plant life. In summer, the tundra is fertile, if only for a short time. An unusual blaze of colour in what is normally a colourless environment. Extreme conditions caused by violent storms and harsh temperature fluctuations determine life in the far north. But a number of animal species and plants have adapted to these conditions. This is now one of the last primeval landscapes on our planet. Ice characterizes both the terrain and the sea of the Arctic for almost the entire year. Along the edges, the ice breaks up into huge ice floes where icebergs of various sizes also collect. It is the polar summer. 3 months of almost continuous daylight when, despite its low radiation angle, the power of the sun provides some warmth. The melting water from the glaciers always finds a way. Crystal clear and icy cold, it flows into the Arctic Ocean. For a few days, the sapphire blue water transforms the landscape and forms an extensive network that briefly brings nature back to life. Here, solitude is limitless. The Arctic's polar region has always been one of the harshest regions of our blue planet. The growing season is short, and so seed production and blossoming takes place within just a few weeks. The water freezes again. And the glaciers become one with the sea ice. A number of the region's coasts and islands are permanently covered with ice, as even the solar energy created in summer is not sufficient to melt the surface ice. Next, we arrive at the Barents Sea, the bordering sea of the Arctic Ocean. The flat gravel beach of Nordøstland, and shrinking glaciers with defiant, scattered flowers. The almost fossilized skeleton of a walrus is a hint of the hidden residents of the bay. A small colony of walruses has taken up residence here. Once there were thousands, each one trawling the seabed in search of food. But in the 18th century, whalers and sealers slaughtered them mercilessly for their ivory. After merely a few decades, almost every one of them was killed. The work of unscrupulous traders whose greed took precedence over anything else. What may be advantageous to tourism is certainly not a blessing for the world's climate. The Earth is growing warmer. Glaciers with their impressive snow-white appearance and dynamic power among this world of ice are receding more and more. When glaciers become covered with new layers of snow which are compressed due to its own weight, it too turns to ice. Glaciers also contain black rock walls of resistant Hekla and Hoek rock. Another trip ashore is planned. A colony of seagulls nests here in the jagged cliff rocks throughout the year. They usually lay 2 to 4 eggs and defend their nests aggressively. The cries of the young gulls at feeding time have woken up a hungry Arctic fox who's desperate for something to eat. Stealthily, but still half asleep, it creeps along a craggy rock wall. Unsuccessfully, because the gull's nests are placed on inaccessible rocks and the fox's still dark summer fur betrays it. However, it discovers a few eggs, which it soon devours. Nearby, a reindeer continuously searches for food among the snow and ice. A daily struggle for survival. The Quaternary is a subdivision of geological time and began 2 million years ago during the most recent period of geological time known as the Ice Age. Over countless years, huge glaciers created great fjords and valleys. The enormous pressure of a 1,000-metre-thick layer of ice led to a lowering of previously formed landmasses. During the several millennia that followed, continuous post-glacial warm periods raised the land once again. One glacial valley after another opens up into the Arctic Sea. In this environment, a trip ashore is impossible. Instead, a Zodiac takes us along the coast of Edgoya Island. The boatman navigates between a large number of icebergs that are traveling in a southerly direction. From the small boats, the icebergs seem even more powerful and unpredictable. It takes some time for these huge blocks of ice to come to rest. The currents force them into the sea, where they are popular with the seagulls. For hundreds of thousands of years, the glacial ice has traveled from the valleys of the inland to the Arctic coast and then to the sea. Icebergs exist for up to 3 years, large ones up to 30 years, and they're mostly white. Particularly exciting is the sight of the Muehlbach Glacier, its surface becoming increasingly weaker as it approaches the ocean. Here the glacier's tongue extends into the sea. Deeply fissured, it reaches the border between land and water. Each year, up to 35 billion tons of ice flow from the glaciers to the sea. One final trip ashore in the strange world of the Arctic. Further south, the tundra looks different. Here it rises onto the slopes of the coastal mountains. In this already warmer area, there's more life. Here, the grazing reindeer are not afraid of people because they're never threatened by them. A short walk leads to the small wooden huts of a camp. A gull mother is closely monitoring the first steps of her young. And mercilessly chases a grazing reindeer cub that has moved too close to her offspring. For a short time, this tranquil landscape is transformed with both color and life. This freezing cold kingdom is the largest wilderness on Earth, fragile, bizarre, and now threatened by a changing climate.